Hello, Commodore fans. I'm Mike Kandler, head baseball coach at Gulf Coast State College, and today I'm joined by Scott Frazier, son of legendary coach Bill Frazier. One of the really unique things about being the baseball coach at Gulf Coast is that we have such a rich, huge tradition of success in all athletics. And of course, nobody is more important to that history and to that tradition than Coach Bill Frazier. And today, Scott and I are just going to kind of revisit that. All of this is set up by an event we have coming. Bill's wife, Jeannie, will be honored on March 28th when we play Chipola, and it's going to be a huge event out here at the college. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're just going to talk about Bill Frazier, the man, the coach, and some of those things. So I'm really honored and happy to have Scott here, and we're going to get the program rolling. Just kind of, Scott, what was the history? How did your mom and dad end up down here in Panama City?
They were, my dad was a baseball coach up in Ohio at Norwood High School. And Coach Jack Jackson, who was the basketball coach at the time in 1960, early 68, I think, came up to, they were recruiting a kid out of Norwood to come down here and play basketball. And I guess my dad got talking to Coach Jackson and found out that there was a baseball opportunity, a head coaching job, and sent in a resume and got called for an interview, and they flew down. He got interviewed and was coaching in 68.
The rest is history. 880 some wins later, and Hall of Fame, and many major leaguers and all that. So that was kind of the beginning of what really turned into a good thing. I know your mom was, from what I was told, she was really an active coach's wife, which I know that's a tough thing on any woman. What was her role in the whole deal?
You know, I remember. I mean, I was 4 years old, I guess, when we came down here, but I still remember the days of when the ball games were going on. After the ball games, my mom was at home washing all the uniforms.
Really?
After the ball games, after a weekend of ball games, and the ball players throughout the years, being at the house having dinner, where they were cooking dinner for half of them, or whatever. Then the next night, maybe the other half was coming over for dinner, and I mean, she was almost, they used to call my dad was a surrogate father to a lot of these kids, and I think at times, especially early in my dad's career down here at Gulf Coast, I said, I think Mama was a surrogate mom to a lot of these kids, and remember a few things early in his career down here. One of the things that stand out is we lived not far from here, off 23rd Street, and one evening a bunch of the ball players came over, and they had these garbage cans slammed full of blue crabs. They'd gone crabbing. Yeah. And next thing you know, my mom has turned the kitchen into, we're cooking crabs, and they're boiling crabs in the kitchen and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, she was very, very much involved with the college in general. Right. My dad at one time he helped with the basketball team at one time when he first got here, and so she was involved in a lot of stuff as that was going on.
Yeah, that seems neat. And I think that probably, if you could talk with those players, now it probably was more important to them. They maybe didn't realize it at the time, but when these young men get away from home, to have a mother, like influence there, somebody just to do some things. So I mean, that obviously probably went a long way to the team success as well. Scott, you had a unique. Both you and your brother Billy had a unique situation that you had your dad as not only a father, but he also coached both of you here.
Correct.
Kind of, how did those two relationships separate? I mean, was he harder on you? What was that like playing for your dad?
No, he was pretty fair, but I, there was no fringe benefits of Daddy being the coach. Yeah. And if you're making mistakes, he was going to get on me just as much as he was going to get on anybody else. He pretty much kept it separated when we were at home and everything. We didn't talk shop a whole lot at home. Unless I really had a bad day.
Yeah. So in that case, you talk shop a lot, actually.
Yeah, pretty much.
No.
Quite often. But no, he kept work away from the house a lot as far as the everyday stuff. Now the ball players coming over to the house and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was a friendly.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much a player-coach situation as it was hey, I'm taking care of the kids.
Right.
I'm taking care of the boys.
Right.
and everything.
How would you describe his coaching style? I mean, I know I've heard the stories, and I actually had I got that opportunity to coach under him for 1 year, which was one of the great learning experiences of my career. But what was it like from a player standpoint to play for Bill Frazier?
He was, and I've talked to some of the coaches here locally that I know and everything, and we've talked about that before. And Daddy was really a fundamental coach. Mm-hmm. He wasn't nothing fancy or anything like that. He was, he told me one time we were talking about baseball, and he said, my philosophy's always been, if you can average 1 run an inning, you're going to have a winning season.
Yeah, that's no doubt.
So if you're averaging 7 runs a game, you're not going to lose very many.
Correct.
And he believed in got a runner on base, you moved him over. He wasn't one to wait for his home run hitter to come up and win the ball game. It was Now we're going to earn those runs, and he was very fundamental in practice. Everybody bunted. You could be leading the country in home runs, but you were going to get your bunting practice in, because if he needed you to bunt, you were going to bunt. But it was all fundamental.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next thought. As times have changed, and I know you're a father, and you've seen how kids maybe, if you want to call it new school or old school. How do you think your dad would relate to what some of these kids, the way they go through life these days? Would he be, would he have made that adjustment, or how do you think that would have worked?
I think he'd have stayed where he was at, and I think he was pretty steady with what his rules were and what he believed in, and I think it was more up to that player to conform with what he wanted. Right. Than it was for him to conform with what the kid wanted.
So you think he would basically be about the same way now, and hey, this is how things are done, which I think is important. I mean, that's kind of how the world works.
And that's how it is through life. I mean, as far as that goes, when you get a job, they're not going to necessarily conform to you. You're going to conform to how that company wants you to do it.
Sure. And, and getting back to your mother then on that same thing, what was she like as a mother? Because obviously she's taking care of these 20-something ball players, but she's also got 2 of her own at the house. What was that like?
The unique part about all that was my dad was at a lot of my brother's ball games growing up, and he saw some of mine, but me and my brother were separated enough to where he was always one level ahead of me.
Right.
In ball. So usually he had a ball game same time I did, so Dad was at one ball game, Mom was at the other. So that was until we started playing for him.
Right. So.
But yeah, she still loves baseball. I mean,
she's been active coming out here over the years.
And she doesn't get out as much as she'd like to anymore, but you can ask her in the mornings usually what's going on. Had Gulf Coast win yesterday, and she can tell you.
Sure. So do you think your mother, as compared to many, she understood the game as well? I mean,
she did. She actually had, and I wish she was here right now so she could maybe remember how she did it. But she had her own way of keeping score. She had a notepad.
Yeah.
And that she didn't know how to keep a scorebook.
Right.
But she had a notepad, and she did the innings, and she'd have the ball players' names, but she had different little marks she would do.
So she probably a better, knowing her, it was probably a better system than the actual scorebook. Yes, probably we should conform to the way she did it. So, Scott, your dad, I know, had a huge influence on his players, and you always like to think as a coach, and maybe it's a little bit, just egocentric, but you always want to say, maybe I'm going to have an influence on these guys down the road. You have had a extremely successful career in law enforcement here in our area for a long time, which thank you for that. And for, that means a lot. I know your dad would be extremely proud of that. And your brother's been very successful in the business world. Do you think that he had an influence on all the players, and was that something important to him? Like, hey, this is going to end, and one day you're going to have to, get a real job.
Being able to talk for all the other ones, I know he's had a lot of influence on them, on several, and still hear about it today. I was telling you earlier before we started that Bruce Combrink and Bill Weber, which were the first 2 ball players that my dad ever recruited to come play here, that they called out of the blue and said, "Hey, we want to come visit with your mom."
It's unbelievable.
And and they're both retired now, and their wives are retired, and they stay in touch with Mama, and guys I play with still stay in touch. But it seems like every year somebody different that we that I don't even remember their name until they start telling me when they played or something like that. Just calls out of the blue to say, hey, how's your mom doing? You know, me and my family are in town. We were hoping to maybe come by and say hi.
Yeah,
and it happens, you know, and it's really neat. So whether he got across to everybody, it's probably hard to determine, but he's definitely touched a lot because I hear from people all the time.
Yeah, that's really saying something, you know, when you think of all those years that go by, and I think that people, you know, still are, you know, thinking about their experience here, and that's kind of what the college should be about. And your dad had other roles here at the college. I mean, obviously he was the athletic director, and I think he was pretty well rounded in other sports. If I'm correct, I believe he was a big-time NCAA basketball official.
He did. He coached, or he called the SEC and the Sun Belt, and I think he did the Final Four 1 year out of the time that he was in there. And then he had his first heart attack 7 years before he passed away, so that was 86. He had his first heart attack in 85. I'm sorry, I was right. 85, and he had to quit officiating then. So, but that was his second love. Baseball was his first love, and officiating basketball was his second. I used to when I was in high school, and he had to call a game like in Birmingham or for UAB or somebody like that. Many a times I'd get home, drive up to Birmingham with him.
Yeah, hop in the car and watch a game.
And then drive him back and get back at 3 o'clock in the morning and get up and go to school the next day.
Yeah, that's fun times though.
Yes, it was.
A little bit of father-son bonding there.
Absolutely.
For sure. Well, Scott, tell me, do you keep in touch with some of the guys that you played with in your era? I know that was a very, very successful era of Gulf Coast baseball.
Got some that still live here in the area that I hear from or run into all the time. Scott Klemo, Keith Baker.
Sure.
Clint Thompson was down here not long ago who caught for us when I played. Jake Stout. He pitched here and went on to Alabama.
Sure.
And I still hear from him now and then. Mike Papajohn, who was here recently talking to y'all's ball players.
Yes, very successful actor in Hollywood, for those of you that
Matter of
aren't
fact,
familiar.
I talked to him 2 days ago.
Right.
And but I hear from him ever so often because he comes into town now and then. And but yeah, usually I still hear from guys. I actually still hear from some of the officials that used to come down here and umpire the ball games in the spring when they had all the teams coming down. Jay Michael from Jay Michael's Restaurant, who was a big booster of Gulf Coast baseball. I think he's still
active.
Is.
Yes.
But him and my dad were pretty close, and he still gets guys that come in there every year that they start talking to him. They go, "Yeah, we ate here when we were playing baseball for, Vincennes or whoever."
Yeah.
So it's kind of there's a lot of people that came here during their careers from other schools that now they're bringing their families to Panama City Beach and things like that.
Yeah, Scott, and not to put you on the spot, but before we finish up our little talk here, I just wanted to say there is a rumor going around town that when you were a young person, you used to catch some fish out of our pond back here and bring them in the dugout right in the middle of the game. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, there's some truth to it. The pond back there, of course, there weren't the buildings around like they are now.
Right.
And as growing up as a baseball coach's son, you were at the ball field quite a bit.
Sure.
And I've caught my share of large bass out of that pond and walked into the dugout to show my dad, of course. So it was, spending the time at the ball field, I think I've laid more sod on baseball fields
That's
with my
kind of
dad than anybody.
Well, there is another side to coaching a lot of people don't see, especially on the high school or junior college level where you're a lot of things going on. So sometimes your family becomes the grounds crew, and like you said, your mom was doing laundry and all that. So it's all, to me, part of it. But Scott, I really enjoy getting a chance to talk with you. I encourage all of our viewers, just look up a few things about Bill Frazier. I know he was a big influence on me and my coaching. Just a tremendous coach, and we really want to encourage everybody to come out March 28th. We're having Jeannie Frazier Day. The ball game starts at 5 o'clock. We're playing Chipola. Of course, one of your dad's former players, Jeff Johnson, is the coach at Chipola.
I played with Jeff at Gulf Coast.
Sure, exactly. And it's going to be a big day. Student government's getting involved. It's going to be a really nice day out here. So 5 o'clock, March 28th, Gulf Coast versus Chipola, Jeannie Frazier Day, long overdue, and it's going to be exciting. But Scott, thank you, and I appreciate it. It's always good to see you.
Hope you have a great year.
Thank you.